first thing I lost was my reflection. I still had my voice, my hands, and my sword, but the water showed me a face I didn't recognize. The second thing I lost was my name. Now I only hear its voice, its whispers, its commands. And the third thing that I lost? The will to resist.
The Aboleth is a creature older than the oceans themselves. They're otherworldly. They slither beneath the surface of the world's deep waters. Its glistening alien body radiates an eerie, unnatural intelligence. In its lair, forgotten ruins and ancient artifacts are strewn across the murky floors. The Aboleth is not just a predator, it is a master of psychic domination, capable of twisting the minds of those who dare enter its domain. The Aboleth is not a monster that you just plop into a fight for a single combat interaction. It changes environments, it changes peoples, it can change villages and cities, and your party's interactions with this creature should not be a one and done thing. This should be an experience. This creature thinks not like a beast, but like a strategist. It's relying on its psychic powers to subdue, control, and manipulate its prey. Its enemies are mere pawns in its game, to be crushed underfoot or turned into loyal thralls. In battle, it should strike from the shadows, using its mucus clouds and telepathy to turn its enemies against each other before it moves in for the kill. To truly bring the Aboleth into your campaign, you'll need to lean into some of these psychic abilities and use the water in its lair to create some environmental hazards and make the ground slippery and the air cloudy around. Don't forget that the Aboleth's lair is just as dangerous as the creature itself, so it should have a lot of servants defending it within this area, but also while around the Aboleth, your players should have their memories manipulated. They should be confused over who are allies and who is not under the control of this Aboleth, and you should make them doubt their own thoughts and things that they see while around these creatures. So let's break down the actual abilities the Aboleth gets in the 2024 Monster Manual. The Aboleth has an armor class of 17, which is pretty hefty, and if your characters, the players in this campaign, are using weapons that have disadvantage on attacks while underwater, that 17 is already very hard to hit. They have a swim speed of 40 feet, which is much, much higher than most characters are going to be able to keep up with, and since it also can create a projection of itself while underwater, getting the players to be in positions where the Aboleth wants them to be, taking advantage of the space underwater, positioning alone should be a huge asset to playing this Aboleth out. Additionally, they have a very high strength, intelligence, and charisma score. And then we're going to start to get into some traits here. Aboleths now have Eldritch Restoration. They get to reform wherever the DM wants them to after being killed, and it's a 5d10 roll for how many days it takes, but you can use your own creativity to determine how long it should take for it to reform, where it reforms, and how that would impact a longer form story and combat/rivalry that this Aboleth might have with your party. They also get this ability called Mucus Cloud, which then extends a curse to creatures that touch it. And if they do fail their saving throw, the creature can now breathe underwater, but it also cannot regain hit points unless it's underwater, which then is almost like its own beckon and call for creatures who are cursed to then stick to the water where the Aboleth wants them to be. While the cursed creature is outside of water, the creature also takes acid damage at the end of every 10 minutes unless moisture is applied to the skin before those minutes have passed. So that Aboleth is going to just be locking people down into needing to be by the water and then using that to their advantage using some of these other abilities we're about to get into. This creature has probing telepathy. If a creature the Aboleth can see communicates telepathically with the Aboleth can learn the creature's greatest desires. And so one thing I think is really cool to use with the Aboleth is that the Aboleth should know the characters' names and maybe some things about them before they ever even know that an Aboleth is around. It should be a very horrifying element to this creature that it knows a lot about the characters before they are even talking with it for the first time. Let's jump into some actions. So the Aboleth gets multi-attack. It can make multiple attacks with its tentacles and use either its consume memories or dominate mind ability if available, using physical attacks, but then also utilizing some of its other abilities on its turn. The tentacle attack is pretty formidable. The tentacle attack is pretty formidable on its own. +9 to hit at a 15-foot reach, pretty decent damage, and it can grapple creatures while hitting them with its tentacles. Then Consume Memories evokes an intelligence saving throw, and for that matter, they take half damage on a success, but on a failure, the Aboleth gains the target's memories if the target is a humanoid and is reduced to 0 hit points by this action. This can be used specifically in the past of your story for NPCs that maybe it has killed, that it then learns a lot about the world and maybe even some of your players in that way. Not so commonly will this be used on your actual players, but if the Aboleth does get the chance to reduce one of your characters to 0 hit points, it then learning everything that character learns can be extremely useful. It also has this major keystone ability for the Aboleth, Dominate Mind, and it can do this twice a day. It's a wisdom saving throw of DC 16 for any creature the Aboleth can see within 30 feet. The creature becomes charmed until the Aboleth dies or is on a different plane of existence from the target. And then while charmed, the target acts as an ally to the Aboleth and is under its control while within 60 feet of it. In addition, the Aboleth and the target can communicate telepathically with each other over any distance. So this is going to be one of the ways that this creature learns a lot about the outside world. It's going to have some form of army that it has already brought together by using this ability over time, and it's definitely going to be heavily needed and used over time against your party, with the likelihood that it may dominate the mind of somebody and then let them act normally over time. You can cause some distrust that way, and then once the major fight ensues, you're going to be having players fighting one another as they are trying to navigate the situation, trying to kill the Aboleth and free their ally. The target does repeat the save whenever it takes damage, as well as every 24 hours, and it spends at least 1 mile away from the Aboleth, ending the effect on itself if it's successful. So another way to break it free is while that person is receiving damage, that may help. But this is still a very powerful ability to use. This creature, the Aboleth, also gets some legendary actions. It gets 3 normally, and it does get a 4th legendary action if it is in its lair. One of those is Lash to make a tentacle attack, and the other is Psychic Drain. If the Aboleth has at least one creature charmed or grappled, it uses Consume Memories and regains 1d10 hit points. That was a lot to cover. These creatures are extremely versatile and should be interacting with the world and shaping the environment and the character's experience of the world for multiple days throughout the in-game time. This is, like I said earlier, not your just plug into a combat and drop for one single event type of creature. This is an experience of something that is going on in your world over time that the players hear about, stumble into, and then try to solve. What I want to do then is talk a little bit about how to expand the encounter that they may have, and then I want to give a full scenario, almost a mini adventure that you can then creatively use however you want to develop your campaign or your arc that is tied to this Aboleth. So when the Aboleth is in its lair, the environment is becoming part of that terror. You should use lair actions to twist the very fabric of reality around your players. They may start experiencing false memories. They could lose track of time. The water itself may seem to shift beneath them as if it's alive, making them question everything that they're doing. This should be almost like a psychological horror if you're trying to be near an Aboleth. You can even introduce an element where the Aboleth is not just trying to kill your party, but make them part of its twisted vision of the world. It maybe wants more so to just convince this entire party to work for it, whether under compulsion or willingly. And so imagine the party's own fears and doubts becoming physical obstacles in the lair as the Aboleth is learning more about them and just trying to twist and shape their experience of being near it, make them regret ever coming close to it, or making them so fearful of it that they may break and willingly serve it. If I were running an Aboleth, this is how I would approach it for the type of campaign and setting I would do. So I would turn that encounter into first some form of early discovery phase. The players hear rumors of like a fishing village where townsfolk are no longer speaking. They just like walk to the edge of the water and stare down into it for long periods of time and then go home and they sleep. What's going on there? The party gets sent out to go figure that out. Then once they arrive, they then begin to investigate. They're discovering that the village leaders have become servants of some underwater creature. They're completely under its control. They communicate that everything is fine, and this is just how they are appeasing some form of underwater entity. To reach the lair, they must navigate a nearby swamp that the Aboleth is actually residing in and avoid the thralls, trying to then see what is the source of all of this confusion and this shift in behavior. And then lastly, you get to some form of final confrontation. The players finally actually enter the lair. There's an ancient underwater ruin buried underneath of the swamp, and they must confront the Aboleth while also trying to break its hold over all of these different human servants from the village. The psychological tension around this would build so much as the Aboleth is bending time and memories, trying to pull the party into this whole charade that it is running, making the players doubt everything that's going on within this space. The enslaved people in this village might think that this creature is a deity. There might be some high-powered cleric who interprets these voices and its presence here in the water as some form of god, and now the party is just trying to figure out what in the world is going on in this village. The Aboleth is a creature of both mind and water, capable of twisting reality and enslaving minds. As a DM, it is important to play up its psychic terror and claustrophobic danger of its lair. Everything around you is trying to get you and cannot be trusted. Whether you're running this as a mind-bending encounter or a full-out scenario, remember the Aboleth is an ancient predator, almost timeless, scheming over lifetimes. Do not let your players forget their interaction with an Aboleth. And if you thought this was terrifying, more is to come. They have added creatures to this monster manual that would make the Tarask shudder. There are some really high-level things coming out. We're heading from here